Friday.
As an example of the masks, if people wanted to wear them, they can.
Friday.
If people wanted to use scarves.
Scarves!
Many people have them. They can. In many cases, the scarf is better. It's thicker.
The scarf is better.
Depending on the material, it's thicker. But they can do that if they want. Now, the recommendation's coming out. We'll see what that recommendation is. But I will say this. They can pretty much decide for themselves right now.
Just a few.
They can decide for themselves.
I think one is very important. The president continues to give people medical advice that is dubious at best. In talking today about masks, he said that in many cases using a scarf can be better than using an actual FDA-approved mask because he said it's thicker. Now there's still more studying to be done on the effectiveness of various kinds of devices against this virus, but that advice is not what the CDC says. The CDC says that things like scarves, bandanas are last resort options for healthcare workers. They have not been proven effective. So if you're considering wearing a scarf over a mask because the president told you to, please don't.
Do you wear a mask?
Scarves! Okay. Hi guys, it's beginning of April something. I guess it's the 3rd, that's my guess. Yep, 3rd. Friday the 3rd. That's the President of the United States of America. He suggests, because he says scarves might be better than masks. I don't think everyone needs to wear a mask every second of every day. I think that there are times in public you need to wear a mask and it makes sense. But there aren't enough masks in the greatest country in the world, or people would tell you it's the greatest country in the world, and I've been telling you it's a messed up place. And they don't have any masks. So our president is saying, wear a scarf. Just wear a winter scarf. It'll be fine. You won't have to worry. Whew. Anyway. You know, the other guy's not much better. Today's lesson is about work, fair work standards. We're going to come back to this later. The main topics involved in fair work have to do with the working conditions of workers in Australia, which they're very strict relative to other countries. And, you know, that's when we get into these ethical issues, like the question that we had last week. When I saw your marks, when I marked your answers, first question, too much plagiarism, too much copy-paste, you can't answer questions copy-paste on a test. Second question, 6-mark question. Some of the answers were okay, but they're very disorganized. There's huge blocks of paragraphs of text. It's very hard for the marking people in Australia to tease out and sort out how to give marks unless you do answers that show direct connections between things. So when you make some circular argument and you don't talk about the words in the question, then you have trouble. So I will put it up here for 1 second. To show a little bit about what I mean. This is year 11, year 12, that's you. Our deadline for our task will be by the end of next week. I think Thursday will be the day. I will accept email task for this task because it's not that many pages. Where's the thing? Where is it? Maybe it has to be in classwork. Classwork, quiz question 1. I guess I can answer it, but I can't. No, I'm not collecting responses. It's in the drive. Oh. So when I look at these answers, Who's my responses? This was the spread of scores. Some people got like, you know, less than 10. That's not very good. If I go to question 2, globalization has an impact in international cooperation in domestic markets. Analyze how these might impact the decision to move their operation to Asia. Now I'm looking at this huge paragraph here, and I think, okay, what do I have to do? Several reasons in terms of international cooperation. I needed to be separated. I needed to have one part about international cooperation and one part about the domestic markets. And then I need to have the impact that goes on the decision of the company. So you got to include all parts of the question. And you should refer to the question. You should use the word globalization. You should talk about international cooperation in one paragraph. You should probably then talk about the impact at the end of that paragraph, and then talk about domestic markets, and then talk about the impact on the company at the end of that paragraph. And then it's easy for me to find, it's easy for me to award, 3 points for each one. But if I look at this big, huge sentence, big paragraph, I'm like, I have to figure out which part is about what. You're not really good enough writers to be able to get away with super long paragraphs. You're just not. Here's one where it says, globalization is seen as a cause for the loss of national identity. That's too general. We're talking about globalization in terms of monoculture. We're talking about just moving a company overseas, right? Look at the marking key. Part 3, 2 political factors. I think that was a hard question. I hope you learned from the marking key that they really were talking about the emergence of trade agreements, which some people got. So I gave points for different things, like things that could be in a trade agreement, like streamline standards for product safety and procedures for import and export custom. But they also wanted you to talk about political stability at one point. Justify why it would be advisable to move their production to Asia. I was fairly open with that, but you had to justify it. Means like you have to say, a lot of people didn't say, yes or no. They should move their operations or production to Asia. Make a recommendation and then give 3 reasons. If I had 4 marks, that's what I would do. I would say, okay, gotta say yes or no. Don't just say, these are the factors and this and this and this. Make your reason and give 3 factors. And tie them to the reason why they should. What's the benefit, like not even what's the benefit, but what is why does it make sense, right? Why does it, that would be a better way of looking at it. Anyway, it's the first try, so big deal. We're getting started and starting to do some more questions in an exam style. After this next task is, after we pay for this next task, turn in. After we turn in this next task, we will not have any more at-home research tasks to do. We're just going to be doing the exam question review and topical reviews for homework. So you're pretty much finished after this project with things that'll be turned in the marks book until we can come back to school. So I don't know when that's going to be. Okay, so employment standards. they're run by these people. Fair Work Australia. Fair Work. Australia's government has a lot of, everything is great country for regulation. They have very strict standards, as you know, for product safety, for warranties and guarantees. They talk about every single product, how long it's supposed to last. It sets some, that means that people who manufacture those goods, they recognize that they have to make something that lasts a certain length of time for the consumer, and that they have a standard in terms of how the quality, product quality. Also true for workplace law. All of these things like pay. Okay, so pay calculator. You can't really read it here, I'll put this online, but pay calculator. Every single job with every level of experience has its own expected salary. That's amazing, right? You need to go through every single job and to give an expected salary is quite amazing. Leave. Tons of vacation time, lots of different kinds of leave, family leave, public holidays, yada, yada, yada. All kinds of leave entitlements. The word entitlement means something that is the right of the worker to have. Other employee entitlements, okay, public holidays, leave, hours, flexibility, that's what we're going to talk about. Working conditions today. Ending employment, big deal, unfair dismissal. We'll touch on it today, but for the most part, we're going to talk about it in detail in the last section of this semester, which is about the employment cycle. So the employment cycle is about hiring all the way till dismissal or retirement. What they can do to help you, awards and agreements, that's about employee contracts. And then, yeah, so they have all the major things that, this is our minimum working entitlements or conditions, and that's what we're going to go through now. So, they have everything you could want. If you're a worker, you have a lot of sense, and they'll do it in multiple languages. How many languages are they going to do? English? Wow, 20 languages. Vietnamese. All right, they even got Vietnamese in there. Okay, so the Fair Work Act of the 2009 gets updated fairly regularly. Fair Work Act. Just know that it's called Fair Work Australia and that it's the Fair Work Act. Again, an act is a set of regulations and laws, not one. Workplaces are governed by the Act. The National Employment Standards have been in place since then. And the Fair Work Ombudsman, which is this website, they're here to provide information. I'm on page 14, by the way, if you didn't know that. National Employment Standards, 14. They're here to educate people about fair work practices so people know their rights. Both employers and employees should know their rights. Helps people when they're having trouble with their employer and the laws and agreements. So it helps them if they have if the employer breaks the law, and can help them take court action. So I think that's a very standard governmental feature. So set standards, enforces standards, helps with legal. So what I'm going to do today is just go through some of the general things. It'll be a very simple lesson. There's not much fun video stuff that goes with this, unfortunately. So, minimum working conditions. I'll just explain things that may be odd. A maximum work week of 38 hours. That's called a standard work week as a full-time employee. There are full-time and part-time. If you're full-time and they need you for more hours, they have to pay you an additional pay rate, which is higher than the normal rate that you get for hour. So, plus reasonable additional hours, I guess, in some situations. The right to a flexible work arrangement. An employee with at least 12 months continuous service, if they have a child under school age, before preschool, or a disabled child under 18 years old. So the company has to accommodate some of the things, a lot of things for people, for the workers. It's quite fair. If the employee has a child, they have 12 months unpaid leave. If they have 12 months of service, and I think they get some pay though for part of it, but they do get a whole year off to take care of a new child. 4 weeks paid annual leave, 4 weeks, a whole month off paid. If you work in a company longer and longer, then you get more time off. 10 days personal leave per year, which is unpaid. If you're a casual employee, what a casual employee is someone who can be hired for temporary work or part-time work. Casual employees have a few days of personal leave from their job. Community service activities, such as emergencies or national disasters. If you're on like the National Fire Force and there's a big fire and the country needs you to go fight the fire, you can have a leave for community service. After 10 years of service, you get a full 2 months of leave. 2 months if you work for more than 10 years for one company. It seems like a lot. But it seems like what life is for, really, to have time off sometimes. Public holidays are paid. And a minimum notice period, which means that when a company wants to let the employee go, they have to give them a month or some time to prepare to find another job, for example. Depending on the length of service and the entitlement to redundant pay, they get a minimum notice period about how, some time to transition to a new job. Fair Work Information Statement. By law, the Fair Work Information Statement about this website must be given by the employer or posted by the employer for all the employees to receive it. So those are just the basic things that workers are entitled to, minimum working conditions. There are other conditions that have to do with, workplace standards and hygiene. Now I'm looking at the coronavirus. They have some additional entitlements. So pandemic leave, if someone has the corona virus, or if someone in your workplace has the coronavirus, then you have rules about standing down employees. A large portion is in self-quarantine, which means the remaining employees can't be usefully employed. So employees can be stood down without pay if they can't be usefully employed because of stoppage. If the employer cannot be held responsible. So it's falling a little bit of falling away from the employer here. The Fair Work Act protects employees from being dismissed for a number of reasons. Because they're temporarily away from work, sick with the coronavirus, for example. So there are some protections, but also there's some issues with health and safety in the workplace. So this is a difficult time. So I'm sure they're not sure exactly how, there's a lot of legal stories going on. We all know what the minimum wage means. I believe in most countries there are minimum wages for workers, the lowest amount that they are, that a job can pay them. In Australia, every job has, like I said before, its own wage that's expected by the government to be paid to them. But for some simple jobs, the minimum wage is universal. So here it says in the Business and Society that the minimum wage in Australia is $16.37 per hour Australian. But that is going up to $18.70 per hour. And that's a fight, right? That's a fight that's been going on between workers and the government. Here it says some workers and unions, they wanted it to be up to $27 per hour, whereas unions asked for it, and the business groups wanted it to be $8 an hour. I think they didn't choose a random number for $8 an hour because the minimum wage in the US, for example, is about $8 an hour or something weird like that. The federal wage, the minimum wage, it's a big fight, you know. $7.25 an hour. That's not livable. That's hopeless. So 40 hours times $7, it's $1,000 a month. You're not going to live on $1,000 a month in the U.S. in the city. No way. You can barely pay for your rent and your car. You know, here we're talking about for people under 20, you're going to make $4.25 an hour. It's insane. It's, you know, it's ridiculous. But states are making it go up slowly, $10, $13. The national government, they don't really care. Let's see here, different countries. Minimum wages by country. So, yeah, we have some countries like Canada. Australia's the highest maybe the highest in the world, outside Germany maybe. To convert everything to dollars. They have it like in PPP, which is interesting. So yeah, in Afghanistan, people get 50 cents an hour. But that equals in what you can buy, like $1.57. You can see Vietnam in here. So see, Vietnam is not great. The total per hour means that they work too many hours. Is like 73 cents an hour, which is like half what you can buy is like $2. So our money goes twice as far as the one thing you can learn from that is, so for each dollar that you make, if you were to count, which I do, because I can't stop thinking in dollars sometimes. If I think about the dollars that I make and then I try to say, okay, how much is that equal to if I'm living in the US? So it's like double, a little bit more than double each dollar's value. Anyway, minimum wage in Australia is one of the higher ones in the world. And Australia is really expensive, so it does make some sense. The national minimum wage is the minimum wage. It applies to employees who are not covered by an award, right? That's that system that has like awards. They're called awards. I don't know why they call them awards, but the award means the expected rate of salary for a certain job. It's legal. So if your job is a computer designer or engineer or whatever, you're supposed to get this much salary per year, and your employer is expected to pay that unless, you know, if they don't, then you can argue with them. But if you're not covered by one of these awards, then it means that you have a minimum wage. This is the minimum wage that can be paid to you. Employers cannot pay people less than the minimum wage. The minimum wage is set as an amount per week for a full-time job. People who work part-time and casual may receive a wage based on the full-time amount. So, in Western Australia, businesses that are not covered by the national minimum wage have to comply with the state wage level. The state minimum wage, I don't know the difference between that, and I think it should be similar. You can't have a state wage that is below the federal wage. And they update it annually. I don't think there's really any particular reason to go through this more. I will talk about employing children, and then a short thing about unfair dismissal, which will get reviewed again. So I'm flipping ahead to page 17. Employing children, the Western Australia. In Western Australia, the employment of children is regulated by the Children and Community Services Act and the School Education Act. The School Education Act of 1999 states that children cannot be employed during school hours. So if they're supposed to be in school, you cannot hire them. After school is possible. If they're an actor, they can get approved employment or something. Under specific conditions with permission from the Minister of Education, and so, yeah. Generally, children need to be at least 15 years of age to be employed. That's when I started working. The CCS Act sets rules about what work and hours children can do depending on their age. Employment laws often change when there's a change in government. Managers are expected to keep up with the changes. Yeah, okay, so management's responsible for the law. Just like the retailer is responsible for what you buy. Some other employment regulations are the Long Service Act. That's an old law. Gives them, I think we saw that already, gives employees 8.5 weeks paid leave after 10 years, so that means 2 months off after 10 years. There's a new law now that the internet is part of our lives, and it says that the workplace has limits on how the workplace can listen to you, use your phones, and regulate and surveil you in the workplace, meaning cameras, etc. And there's the Workplace Compensation and Injury Management Act. So that one is important. Employers pay taxes into a government government fund called workplace compensation. So if workers are injured on the job, they will receive salary in the future. They will get some disability covered by the government if the business is put in. If they cannot work anymore, then that could go on for a long period of time. So there's coverage like that's like insurance for the employer. The employer is supposed to pay this tax to ensure that their workers don't get injured on the job. Okay, so I'm going to talk about unfair dismissal on page 15 for a little bit of time, not too much, and then I don't think there's much more to go through the employment standards today, except for that. So, unfair dismissal. Dismissal is when an employer wants to let an employee go, in other words, fire them. So, there has to be reasons for it though. In Australia, the workers have a pretty significant protection in terms of unfair dismissal. There has to be some reason for it that can be justified. Now, there are three main reasons why it might be justified. The first one is simply obvious. They break a major rule and they can be proven to have stolen from the company or did something that's you know, even illegal. So in that case, that's their contact in the workplace or something, you know. But you have to, even then, you have to give a warning. If it's illegal, you can just it could be let go. But if it's questionable behavior, then it turns into conduct and performance in the workplace. So conduct and performance in the workplace has to be reviewed over time. There are steps that need to be taken to give the employee a chance to improve their performance or conduct, depending on the situation. So that's the second thing. So the first thing is breaking the rules or doing something illegal on the job. Second is to, you know, over time, not be able to improve their conduct or performance. And the last thing is as it says here in page 15, operational requirements of the business. So that means that this is a corona problem. If businesses have less customers and they might shut down, or there's some, whatever reason, they don't really have as much, they change the company, they take out one department, they just do shipping, they don't have a restaurant service anymore. Something happens where they don't need as many workers for their operation. It's not the workers' fault, it's just the operation change. So that is called, I'll introduce the topic, redundancy. Someone is redundant, it means that it's for the operation of the company, they're no longer needed. It also has a second meaning that there are two people who are doing the same job. So if two companies get together and they had two accounting departments and they merge the companies, you don't need to have two sets of accounting departments. So probably one of them would be not needed anymore, redundant. An employee may claim that they have been unfairly dismissed. So if the employer cannot justify that they broke the law or the rules of the company, did break, or that they didn't improve their performance over 6 months or a year, or that there's a reason why they need to cut back on staff, then the employee can claim to have been unfairly dismissed. Employees covered by the industrial relations system, industrial relation means worker and employee, in Western Australia can lodge a claim in the state. And there's some details about what this means. So on page 16, if an employee has performance issues, the employer must document a fair process to show how they try to improve the performance through training, coaching, support, making some KPIs, some goals for the employees, setting goals, and gave them a chance and gave them clear warnings, and there's steps in that. We'll come back to that when we go through the employment cycle. Under the national system, an employee has been unfairly dismissed if they find that the dismissal was harsh, unfair, or unreasonable. The dismissal was not a case of a genuine redundancy. So the company cannot lie and say that, oh, we just really don't need that much staff anymore. They have to show that sales are down, that they merged the company, they have too many staff in some way. The company has to prove it. And 3, the dismissal does not follow the code for employees to be dismissed. Employees of small businesses cannot make an unfair dismissal claim if they are dismissed in 12 months after being hired. So this rule only applies to employees who work for more than a year in a company. I guess that's to make sure that they're really believe that they have a long-term relationship. Employees of larger businesses can make an unfair claim after 6 months. So a small business is defined as 15 employees or less. If there is serious misconduct, such as theft, violence, or some health and safety danger, it is fair for their employer to dismiss an employee without warning. They have a checklist for small business owners so they can help them to understand what the situations are when that might happen. So, of course, most of the, all of the unlawful dismissals, many of them are about discrimination. So in business and society here on the side it says there could be unlawful dismissal. It is unlawful to dismiss an employee based on discrimination such as gender, family situation. If someone decides to have a baby, you cannot discriminate and fire them. Well, you know, we can't have you here because you're going to have to take time off. No, unfair. Cultural background, politics, marital status, sexual preference, disability situation. If the disability is not, the disability is weird. So if you cannot walk, but your job is an accountant, then your disability does not affect your job performance. If you cannot walk and your legs aren't working and you're supposed to lift heavy boxes, then it's hard for the employer. It's not discrimination to say that you cannot lift the heavy boxes. It would be discrimination to say that you cannot be an accountant. And also membership of a union, that's very important. You have to have, the government supports and protects the rights of people to have, to be unionized. And that's very important for unions to be able to negotiate with management for their rights. So I don't want to go too far today. That's enough, I think, for now. That's just an overview of some of the employment standards. The next class, we're going to go into contracts. Might have a class or two on contracts, and then we have to go into, we have two more sections after that. We have management structures, the structures of how organizations are run and managed, and then we have the employment cycle. So that should take 4 weeks, and then we're going to review for a possible exam, maybe, test, I don't know. We'll see. I'll set up a Zoom time this weekend so you can ask more questions about the business plan, which will be due at the end of next week.